Mark Carney has never sacrificed or struggled the same way that young people have today.
I agree with you 100%. Not only has Mark Carney never made any sacrifices, he's not about to start now. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. It's a strange time for Canadian politics when you see the politician coming out 2 weeks before the release of the budget and talking to a room full of university students about how if they simply do without for the next 10 to 15 years, they might finally get to have something. The Liberals are desperate. There's no other word for it. You would, if you were trying to reach the nation as a whole, you would have had this announcement from the Prime Minister's desk. I mean, there's a lot of areas that I could think of that would have been a much better choice than some conference room in the University of Ottawa with students who are attending the University of Ottawa, I assume. Of course, it didn't matter that they were in the room. He was simply reading it off the teleprompters that he carries with him. I'm sure he takes them into the bathroom with him. Like everywhere he goes, he's got teleprompters with him. They must be solar paneled or something. Before we get into this, I want to encourage all of you to ensure that you're still subscribed, and I would encourage all of you to ensure that you still have the notification bell hit. Those of you that are watching that are not subscribed, I would encourage you to subscribe. Share this channel with all of your socials. Share this video with your socials. Let's get into this. There is no reason that Mark Carney should have appeared at the University of Ottawa to make this announcement, to talk to the young people about the budget, unless he was hoping that he could convince all of you that it was that he was on your team. The Liberals are well aware that they don't have anybody under the age 35, not really, who supports them. I mean, there are some, I suppose, but for the most part, people want jobs, people want places to live, and everything that the Liberals have done to Canada has removed that from the possibility. Nonetheless, we're going to hear a couple of things that he said in this 20-minute plea for people to just give him more time. A lot of it I cut out because a lot of it you've already heard before. Like, if you want to know what he said in a lot of it, just go listen to his campaign promises that he still hasn't kept. He's still saying the same thing, how he's going to do this and he's going to do that, and it's going to be sooner or later. And I mean, it's 6 or 7 months has gone by. People have to, usually people would have made adjustments by now, but not the Liberal Party, because they don't know how or they don't want to.
Strengths based on close ties to America have become our vulnerabilities. And as a result of that, the jobs of workers in our industries most affected by the U.S. tariffs in autos and steel and lumber are under threat.
Of course, that's the narrative that they're hoping you'll believe, but that's not true. If that were true, then why would you not have plugged that leak before? Having all of our industry tied to the United States is the vulnerability. Having no internal economy, having no internal development, having no encouragement of foreign investment, of domestic investment, that is the vulnerability. It's just that Donald Trump, who felt the same thing, having all of that vulnerability, is doing something about it that the Liberal government is not prepared to do. Because if they do that, they will not benefit.
And our businesses are holding back investments, restrained by the pall of uncertainty that's hanging over all of us.
No, they aren't. They're not investing, and they haven't been for years because of the Liberal government. It's not just recently that they have decided not to invest. They haven't been investing since 2018. I can check. You can go to StatsCan and check it as you like. It's all available. You can go back all the way to 1980 or something like that. You can see. There's no foreign investment because of the Liberal government, and only because of the Liberal government policies. Donald Trump is down there offering 15% corporate tax rates. Carney's government, it's 40%. If you owned a business, which one would you park your company in? It's that simple.
First and foremost is here at home, so we can take control of our future, and as I said, give you back yours. In the last 6 months, we've worked to create the right conditions to get big things built faster.
Big things built faster is what he was saying in the campaign trail, but he's taken him 6 months to get the conditions to build the campaign. Why didn't he say that in the campaign? Why didn't he say, I need a year to get conditions ready? He didn't. He said it's going to be the fastest in the history of Canada. 6, 7 months later, he's still saying it's going to be.
At the end of June, we passed the One Canadian Economy Act to remove federal barriers to internal trade and to fast-track the approval of nation-building projects.
Which did nothing.
In August, we opened the Major Projects Office, which serves as a single point of contact to get those nation-building projects built faster.
So he was elected in April. It took him to August to open a building, to make an office building that is still not fully staffed, that is costing Canadians a lot of money that we don't have. And none of that is jobs for me and you. None of it.
At the core of our strategy will be to catalyze unprecedented investments in Canada over the next 5 years. That's what's going to come above and beyond these projects.
5 years he wants you to wait now, Canadians. 5 more years, and then we might see something. That's what they've been saying. Oh, it just makes me so angry. Why don't you offer some hope instead of just repeating the things that we know are not working?
To help double the pace of housing construction within a decade, using new factory technology, cutting building times by 50%, reducing costs by 20%, and lowering emissions by 20%.
First of all, there's no reducing the cost by 50%. That is an absurd thing to say. Prove it. Because I can build a house, and I'm telling you right now, what he just said is not true. Secondly, how does he prove to me that it's reducing emissions? Prove it. Because I have built houses, and no matter what you tell yourself, what you want me to believe is that we're going to move the lumber further. We're going to mill it only in one location, and all the while, we're still going to have to put the wiring in, the plumbing in, and build the foundation. Of course, he's only talking about building one foundation and then putting it up 50 stories so you can live in a cubicle and hear your neighbor wake up every morning for 25 years and use the bathroom. I mean, they have known about building housing in a warehouse for 75 years. In some regions of the world, it might work. Like if you were to go into some of the poorest areas of the world, it probably would work. If you want to come into a country like Canada that's spread out and frozen, it does not work.
Last month, we signed a historic free trade deal with Indonesia, the world's 4th largest country by population. We've just signed foundational agreements with the United Arab Emirates in AI, and with the EU in defense and trade, and with Germany in critical minerals.
Why don't we have any of that happening in Canada? Why are we not making EI for Canada and critical minerals for Canada and trade with inside of our own entire country? Why do I care what's happening in Indonesia and Europe and in the EU, the EU has dropped nearly $2 billion into the United States of America. Indonesia hammered out a much faster deal with Donald Trump. And the EU, they've got so many deals with Donald Trump because of the various countries in it. So this isn't even a deal. This is a foundation. This is like a memorandum of understanding. We're going to get to it sooner or later. Don't you worry.
We're re-engaging with global giants India and China while we deepen our partnerships with our traditional allies.
America is our traditional ally, bud. There's not more of a traditional ally than the United States of America. And you're re-engaging with China and India. That's great. That's great. That's great. I mean, India is a big market. The thing about China and India, though, and the thing about most of the world is that they're very nationalistic. So you give the same product to a person from India in India, and one says made in India, one says made in Canada. They will buy the one made in India. And don't even get me started on how hard it is to get a product that is not made in China sold in China.
And to build on this momentum, and to put it in context, our goal for Canada is to double our non-US exports over the course of the next decade, generating more than $300 billion more in trade, and that's new orders for Canadian resources, technologies, and expertise.
That means he wants to sell all of our natural resources unrefined to all of these other countries that are going to make a lot of money off of it. He wants to let China come in and take out all of our critical minerals so they can refine it, because he doesn't want to build those factories here. If he was working on building those factories here, he would have just said that. But what he said was, we're going to sell them all of our raw material. Or do you imagine in your mind that there are so many manufacturing facilities in Canada that are just not hiring you? And that's the idea. That's why you don't have a job, because there's so many of them that they've chosen not to hire you. We don't manufacture in Canada. They manufacture in China, and we bring it in Canada. manufacturing in Canada is something that this government should be putting to the fore, like Donald Trump is doing. Manufacturing in Canada is something that we need to be taking care of as our own, because our government is not helping us in this. And making sure that we do not send a single solitary gram of critical minerals or any of the mining that is required, that happens in this country, to any country but ourselves, is what we have to make sure we are doing. Then we will guarantee that we have the future that is bright and shiny for the youth. Then and only then. Telling us that we're going to sell all of our materials to China by the boatload for nickels while they turn it into trillions is not something that's going to help the youth in this country at all. Pierre Poilievre and some of the Conservatives came out in the morning to answer this pathetic plea from the Prime Minister for the youth to support him. I tell you that that is a horrible idea. The youth should not be supporting him. And I'll get into that once we hear a couple of things that Pierre Poilievre had to say. I just want to lay it out. Like, I want you to see it so you can understand that he at least gets what you're going through. He's not going to ignore you like Mark Carney telling you to wait 5 more years or 10 more years, or all the foolishness that's coming out of his mouth. How by setting up a bureaucracy and centralized housing development, somehow that's going to give you a piece of land and a home to build and a decent job. Pierre Poilievre was talking common sense, and some of the things he had to say are pretty important. So if you're out there as the youth, you need to hear this.
But there were 2 things that were different. One, I give Mr. Carney credit for being honest with young people. He went on at length about how much worse life is for today's youth than it was when he was young. And he's right about that. This is the first generation in Canadian history that cannot afford home ownership. This has never happened before. It happened after 10 years of Liberal government, doubled housing costs, giving us the worst housing inflation in the G7. So it is true that now is the worst time, probably in the post-war period. You will not find another period in our history when it has been worse to be a young person. But
I'll tell you right now, because it's hard, right? When you're young and you're born, you're like, oh, you just assume the world has always been like that. Like, you assume that cell phones have always existed. You wouldn't even know what a payphone looks like. So the idea that this is, always been the way it is not the situation. It used to be that by the time you were 25, not only did you have your education, but you had a decent job lined up and you were ready to buy a house. Nowadays, houses are so far out of reach, not just because of the lack of supply, but because of the corporations investing in rentals, right? The corporations are buying up entire streets, and like Brookfield owns 900,000 houses in the United States of America, as an example. And then they want to never allow for a new supply, because then their bottom lines, their margins will be harmed. You can't allow for centralized housing. We need to get out of the way. Get out of the way. You know how many guys could go to work right now building houses? We'd have 100,000 of them up in no time at all. Now, I know Mark Carney promised that he would be building double the amount within 10 years in his little speech. What he leaves out is he's going to be quadrupling the amount of immigration. So you'll never catch up.
But instead of saying, given that things are so bad, we Liberals are going to reverse course on all of the policies of inflation, of blocking home building, of standing in the way of resource projects. Instead of that, he asked young people to make more sacrifices. This was the sacrifice speech to Canadian youth. And he said it's going to take lots of time to reverse all the damage. Mr. Carney, our youth have sacrificed enough. All they have done for the last 10 years is sacrifice. The purchasing power of their paychecks are down. More of their money goes to taxes than into food, clothing, and shelter combined. They are no longer safe on their streets after Liberal bail has unleashed crime and chaos everywhere.
You pay all them taxes and you get less. You pay more and you get less. That's the lifestyle of the Liberal government. They never want to provide for you, because as soon as they provide for you, they don't get. Right? The better you live, the worse that they live. So you have to ask yourself when you're out there telling when you're like going, oh no, I have to vote Liberal because I don't even know why you would vote Liberal anymore. Maybe 50 years ago it made sense under the name, but they're not liberal. They're very unliberal, as a matter of fact. Liberal in name only. They don't want you to speak. They don't want you to have a job. They don't want you to have a house. What's liberal about that?
He needs to do one simple thing. If we're going to diversify our trade overseas, get out of the way. Get out of the way, let builders build, workers work, and resources travel. Thank you very much, everyone.
Obviously, the best thing that we can do is get the Liberal government out of the way. There's no denying that if they weren't there, we would have had the entire summer to start building things. We would be having shovels in the ground, and development would be further along, and all those jobs would be going to the youth of this country. The people would be getting the training, they would be getting the very big paychecks, they would be looking at buying a proper home, not a cubicle that nobody wants. If they wanted them, the ones that are thousands of them that are in Toronto or in Vancouver would already be bought. They're not being bought no matter how many times the Liberal government looks the other way when they exceed their immigration numbers. Because people who would buy them are not already have one, and who the other people don't have the money, and they don't have the appropriate career lined up. And that's what we have to ask ourselves. What is the Liberal government offering you along the way of careers? Oh, we're going to this centralized, housing building, which of course Brookfield is heavily involved in. Oh, we're going to do carbon capture, which of course Brookfield is heavily involved in. We're not going to make a pipeline because who owns the largest pipeline in Canada? Brookfield. There's a theme here, guys, that we need to be looking at. There's a theme here that we need to ask ourselves, what's the best thing for me, the youth, and my children and my future, and any hope that I have of ever owning anything? Is it not better to own a small house on a small piece of property than a tiny little cubicle 50 stories up into the air? At least you have your own driveway, you have your own electricity, you have your own room, you have your own space, you have your own backyard, you have everything to yourself, a little bit of privacy, a little bit of independence, a little bit of freedom. So you have to wonder, why is it this liberal in name only government doesn't want you to have that kind of stuff? They don't want you to have the freedom. They want you to live like you do in other parts of the world. When you're out there asking yourself, well, here I am 20 years old, and when my parents got here, well, why did your parents come here? Because where they were wouldn't provide for them the houses and the backyards and all the things that I just listed off. It's not rocket science. I'm sure you're wise enough to figure it out. What you need to do, though, if you are young and you're out there and you're listening to my voice, is make sure the people around you know. You have to ensure that they get out and vote, especially young men, because young men are historically the people that don't vote the most. You have to get out and vote. You have to make sure that your voices are heard, that your displeasure is announced. Because if you're not vocal, then they're not going to know what you're looking for. And if you're not going to tell them what you're looking for, then you can't complain when you don't get what you're looking for. Obviously, I understand that you're looking for a level of independence, and the idea of a condominium doesn't appeal to anybody that's under the age of 50, I suppose. And even then, people that are over the age of 50, they complain that they have to sell off all the stuff because houses have a lot of room in them. And when they do buy condos, people that are over 50, they rarely buy them in Canada. They buy them where it's warm. They retire. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that you shouldn't buy a condo if you're looking to buy one, but I don't believe that people are looking to buy one. I believe that people, even if they wanted to buy one, don't have the jobs. I don't believe that the young, especially the young men in this country, have the careers lined up that the Liberal government is overlooking. He spoke to a room full of university students. He didn't go to a trade school. He didn't go to a construction site. He didn't go to any of these places. I'm sure he doesn't even know where they are. Mark Carney is very out of touch with what's happening. He just wants people that are young because they've done the math and they know that the youth is not going to support the Liberal government, and they're losing a lot of the boomers because the boomers now realize that their grandchildren are never going to have houses underneath the Liberal government. And many of the boomers that are very selfish and voted it that way are trying to sell their houses off to Brookfield. So we're never going to get that vote either. What we have to ask ourselves is, what are you looking for? Are you looking for central government? Are you looking for that kind of control? Because if you are, then congratulations, you have already arrived. If you want independence, if you want your own house, if you want to have the ability to do what you want to do on your yard, short of breaking any of the civil codes and all the rest of it, turn your music down and don't start any bonfires and those kinds of things. But if you want to plant flowers or not plant flowers or put a greenhouse or not, or that's all your right. You have the ability to do that when you own the property. That's why we all want to own property. We want to have that, the king of the castle. Of course we do. People don't come out of these high density areas in many of the countries that I could list off in my mind, and I'm sure you can think of, because they tell themselves, I'm going to struggle to get across the world, overpay for an education, have too much taxes coming off my check just so I can live exactly the same ways over here as I was over there. I mean, that does that make any sense? If that's the situation, why wouldn't you just stay there? Because those cultures are never going to allow you to own anything, because they're far too set up, too rigid in their who gets what in their caste system, their caste style systems. Well, we can't permit the caste system to come into Canada. We cannot allow that. We cannot allow anything that impedes our freedom of speech and our freedom to own and our freedom to work. These are the kinds of things that Canada needs to protect. These are the kinds of things that the youth, and again, I say, especially you young men out there who stay quiet and and tell yourself that your vote doesn't matter. Of course, your vote matters. And you have to make sure that all of your friends know their vote matters. And if you hear anybody around you trying to convince you that your vote should be cast in a certain way and you don't agree with them, just tell them, I don't want to talk to you about my vote. Tell them straight into their face. None of your business who I vote for. And if you don't like it, you can sing it walking. Because this is important. This is how we ended up in this situation. Remember that. This is how we got here. We allowed people that were not looking out for our best interests to cast votes that led to their best interests. And that's a small group of people, not the large group of Canadians. If we didn't have the Liberal government in the way right now, the Conservative government could have repealed all those 9 laws, and there would already be shovels in the ground. There would already be paychecks rolling. There would already be investment from these countries and from these people. If they're going to invest in them in the United States, why wouldn't they invest in them in Canada? That's what they do. They invest in them. They would invest in them all over the planet because that's how they make their money. All right, I'll save that rant for another one. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.